This is Jumanji Stampede, and it's a fantastic new game that I just had to take a look at. It was released in 2023 by Spin Master Games. Let's dive right in here, starting with the box. This has beautiful, colorful, eye-catching art here. I really like how you've got the characters from the more recent movies front and center. I was wondering where Shelley Oberon's character is, and he's right up here by the J. So they have everybody else very prominently displayed, particularly Ruby Roundhouse. Also, I like that they show a little bit of the board right up front. However, there's much clearer imagery on the back. You get to see all 6 traps on display. Really nice close-up of the characters. I like the detail on the character models. We'll get to that in a little bit. The game does come in a flip-top box, which I don't think is ideal, especially for something with small parts like this. I'm seeing that a lot with modern games, that we're getting these flip-top boxes, and I'm not a big fan. The ends tend to pop open, and you can drop parts out, so you have to be very careful. I highly recommend putting small parts from games like this in a Ziploc bag. You don't want to lose track. Now, another thing is the size of this box. Now, I'm a little bit put off by how difficult it was to get everything back into the package when I was done playing. It took a lot of finesse. That being said, it's a great looking box. I wish we had a few extra cubic inches in here to store everything, but otherwise, I really can't complain about the quality of everything else that comes with this whole package. So let's get on to the game board here. This is 2 blow molded plastic 3D pieces. So these are hollow underneath with the art on top. And then there are 4 cardboard pieces that fit together kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. There are some cutouts right here in the corners, and they fold over at the halfway point. So this is not one large board with a piece set on top of it. It's 2 blow molded plastic pieces, and then sort of these large jigsaw puzzle pieces that assemble around the perimeter of the board. So these can be collapsed for easy storage, and the 3D pieces, because they're hollow underneath, can be stacked. The traps do come off. We do have a lot of small tokens, a lot of small plastic pieces, and again, that's kind of my concern for storage and getting everything back into the game there. But otherwise, very beautiful craftsmanship on this. The art is so amazingly detailed. It's incredibly eye-catching. It's very bright and colorful. The 6 traps, you've got an elephant here. It's just a little weighted ball. Now, this one sits in a little recess on the map at the top of this hill. Oh, I knocked the baboon out of his tree. And it has a small trigger on it, so you can pop that trigger there, and he rolls out pretty quick. So I think that's pretty nice. There's a similar trap that is a rhinoceros up here on the map, a smaller weighted ball that just sits in a little recess right up here, and you just drop him down with your finger, and he rolls down a random path on the map. So again, 2 similar traps, but they both are thematically distinct, so it works. I mean, with the type of map design we've got here. I like this baboon here. He's got a little tree launcher. It's a little spring-loaded tree. You just pull it back and let him go. That's a lot of fun there. There's a snake over here. This snake is spring-loaded, and you just hang him up on the tree, so when it's time to let him go, you push his head down, and he spins. And all you do is just wind him back up and set him there on that tree. So there we go. There was a good wind-up on that one. That snake can be kind of tricky because it can be easy to overwind. It doesn't take a lot to really get him around so that he's useful for the game, and you're not really like trying to bat for a home run when you're hitting player pieces on this board. There's a little, I love this, there's a little jaguar, a little yellow cat on the back of this with a launcher, so you push this button and he pounces right out at your character. The little model there is so good. I love that. So, and it's actually relatively easy to reload, considering that you're kind of popping it in there blind. It's designed to be easy to just pop into his little cave. The Rhino Mountain, now when you're properly starting the game, the Rhino jewel is missing. It's a very important jewel in the game. We'll get to that in a minute. But I had this horn up for display purposes, but I took it out because I want to show the detail. This Rhino maquette, it has a little mechanism that when you replace the horn, his eyes glow. They don't like, there's no light coming up, but it's the plastic. There's a piece of plastic very similar to his horn in there with a little bit of frosting on it so that it looks like his eyes light up purple. So that was really neat. A very small detail that they didn't need to add, but I'm really glad they did. On top of that, the rhino serves as a hazard. He has a small metal ball bearing that rests in the back of his head. So if the boulder is rolled as a hazard that should go off, that little ball bearing rolls down the mountain. So very cool. Again, I love the map. It's gorgeous. The traps are all kind of scattered. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. We got a little 3D bridge even, which I love. It just adds a whole nother dimension. And that's actually a dynamic that's used in the gameplay as well. But it adds a whole nother dimension to this board. So a lot of fun here. Now, this is a bit of a departure from some of the board games that I'm used to. I'm used to player versus player competitions. In this instance, this is kind of a story-based player versus environment game that's cooperative. So what you have is the 4 players from the game that are modeled after the more recent Jumanji movies will work together to collect 5 powerful magical crystals around the island of Jumanji and bring them back to their respective temples on the 4 corners of the map and on top of Rhino Mountain before Draven, the villain, makes his way from his start to the top of Rhino Mountain. And Draven has to follow this little dotted line path here. So he's always very predictable. So it's kind of neat how they've balanced this game out. I initially, when I got into it and I was thinking it was story-based and it was PvE, it might feel a little bit wonky, but it actually plays very nicely. There's 2 rule sets based on if you're playing with 2 players, 3, or 4. So if you're playing with 3 or 4 players, there are these 2 respawn tokens. If a player loses all 3 of their life bars, they can spend a respawn token to start again at the beginning of the game. The respawn tokens are shared amongst the team, whereas the life bars are each respective player. So how it'll work is players start at this central starting point here, and each turn consists of 2 parts. The explore phase. The explore phase is the first part. That is where a player can move up to 6 places, and they can find their way towards one of these little compass tokens here on the board. They can overturn that token and either reveal one of the magical crystals that they need to take back to its temple, or one of these action icons. And what one of these action icons does is it triggers them to draw an action card. And there are a couple different things that can happen when you get an action card. You can get something like this, which is a keep card. This allows a player to keep this with their player card and play it at any time. This allows them to, for instance, this card allows them to look at the top 3 cards in the deck and see what's in store. Or you might get an instant or now card. Now, this is the Stampede card. And the Stampede card tells you to stop everything and let off every one of the traps on the island at once. So sometimes you get an action icon, it can be a big help. Sometimes you get an action token, and it can really hurt. Now, players will want to try to locate one of the powerful crystals on the island. Here's the blue one, for example. When a player finds that crystal, they'll place that crystal on their card here, which means that they have possession of that crystal, and continue to work their way towards the temple that that crystal belongs in. When they land there, they can drop that crystal. When they get all 5 crystals returned, players have restored magic to the island of Jumanji and won the game. Now, there is one extra advantage to returning the pink rhinoceros horn crystal to its rightful place on Rhino Mountain. Not only do you get to put the really cool little plastic insert in and make the rhino's eyes light up, but players will get basically like a permanent advantage. They get to draw one of these power cords, and that's all 4 players. So any one player returns that rhino crystal to Rhino Mountain, players get to pull these out, and like, this is restore. They can restore up to 4 life points per player. And yes, there are some advantages where you even get gain a 4th life bar. So it's a random grouping of power-ups that you get, many of which last till the end of the game. Now, that's the explore phase. The danger phase is the second half of any player's turn. So the explore phase, players make their way around the map and try to uncover their tokens. After they've made their 6 moves and uncovered any token, and played out any action card that they turned over during the explore phase, they enter the danger phase. They take these 4 danger dice and roll. There's a black die that indicates how many moves Draven should make during this danger phase of that player's turn. The red danger die indicate which traps are activated during that turn. In this instance, the boulder that's on Rhino Mountain. Once players activate all the traps, they enter a small cleanup phase where they calculate which players lost a life bar, so for instance, or a health bar. So for instance, if your player is hit by one of the hazards, they lose 1 health bar and you replace them back where they were. If your character loses all 3 of their health bars, they're dead, and they can choose to use a restore point, which places them back at the start of the game. This is a lot of fun. This game actually, one thing that I have to credit here too is I like to go over the instruction manuals. This actually came fabric stitched, which I really like. It didn't add any weird creases or folds when you're opening this up. It's a full color print with very clear photos, a nice rundown of your 4 characters, a brief example of what's going on Jumanji. Really nice example of how to set the map up. However, I do want to point out probably the most useful thing was the character description for the bad guy. Draven is an ex-military strategist. Sorry. That paragraph doesn't need to be in here. We could just get rid of that. There is some fluff as far as how the graphic design is that the first time you're kind of fumbling your way through these instructions, it can be easy to get lost. But the actual gameplay is very easy. And the nice thing is they did include quick play instructions on the back, which I'm not going to lie, I did not flip over to the back of the book right away. And I really wish this was the first thing that I read and then went back and read the instructions. But they're bright, they're colorful, they come in a great, very well-bound book. So again, points for the really nice instruction manual on this game. There's also some neat features, like there are 2 little caves here that players can use as a shortcut to jump across the map. Players also in possession of power crystals can trade items. So if a player passes another player, they can hand off an item that they pick up, though they can only really carry 1 crystal at a time. So I guess that depends on if, say, a character would be safer navigating around the periphery of the map where none of the hazards are going to get them versus a character who has more health bars navigating the central portion of the map. So I could see, for instance, if I had a crystal and I had another player here who was low on health and I didn't want to make him risk it for the biscuit, I'd drop that crystal and get back to exploring so that he didn't have to risk his life. And that's the interesting thing about this being a cooperative game is players can make those decisions. There's a lot of strategy involved with it. And I like the fact that because you're not competing with each other, but you're competing against a non-player character, it really adds this feeling of kind of camaraderie and does add to just the story aspect of the game. I really felt like I was playing one of the movies, one of the more modern Jumanji movies. It was really fantastic. They captured the feel of the game. I really like the explore mechanic where you're making your way around the island and you have this random chance of getting something that could be good or bad or getting your objective, your crystal. So that was a lot of fun. I really love the detail. There's a lot of fine work put into these character models here. I mean, every single one of them looks just like the respective characters they're supposed to be. I, I actually really like how Shelley Oberon, the plump one, has just this very great dynamic pose. Ruby Roundhouse is great, very dynamic, very action-packed. When I first saw when I was unpacking this that I'd have a player card that I had to use, I associated it with more of a role-playing type game and thought, man, this is going to be really complex. But honestly, you know, this is recommended for ages 8+, and I think that's a good sweet spot. I don't think I would have a hard time playing this with, say, an 8-year-old or my nephew or, you know, any group of kids. It wouldn't take very long to teach them the rules, which is nice. You kind of worry about some of these set piece games being too complicated for the audience that they're going for. And this hits a really awesome sweet spot. And you know, it's just enough that it was a blast playing with adults. I play tested this with my wife when we first got it, and just as the 2-player game, as soon as we were done with one run, we wanted to reset the board and play it again. It was a blast. So I highly recommend Jumanji Stampede. This is well worth tracking down. This is a treat of a modern game. This is something that I wasn't expecting. It reminds me of a lot of really neat set piece games that I was fond of in the early 90s and late 80s. So very exciting. Definitely check this one out. This is Forbidden Bridge, and it's my all-time favorite game. I'm really excited to make this video today. I have the 1992 Milton Bradley edition of Forbidden Bridge here, and the 2021 Hasbro edition. So many of you might not know this, but in 1991, Hasbro purchased Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers and combined the brands in 1998 under the name Hasbro Games. So what you're gonna see is a lot of classic Milton Bradley and Parker Brother games are actually being reproduced by Hasbro. So today I wanna have a look at these games, see how 30 years has changed Forbidden Bridge, see what's gotten better, see what might have gotten worse, and let's see if it's still just as fun as I remember. So first and foremost, let's compare our covers. The box art on the 1992 edition has a very angry idol here. I love all of the detail. I love the little taglines, you know, the motorized adventure game. That's a lot of fun. Very scary there. One thing that I noticed that was kind of a quirk of the packaging is if you just turn it around, it's upside down. So it's actually designed when you're shopping for you to just flip it. One thing that I don't like is as the game's gotten older, there were no storage solutions that came with the game. It was just an empty box with all of the parts in bags or little space saver pieces of cardboard, but nothing that would hold everything in place. So one thing that I do struggle with is storage. When I put the game away in its original case, you know, I have to put the small parts in a Ziploc bag, and then I have not just the game board cardboard, but these little borders. That cardboard ends up sitting loose in the package, and because it's curved as how it fits into these plastic pieces, I don't really have a whole lot of solutions for storage. So that's always bothered me. I always felt like I was at risk of wearing out the board faster by having it loose in there, and I always try to cheat this pretty gently as it's my favorite game. Now we go on to the 2021 edition. Right out of the bat, when we talk about storage, I want to mention that I absolutely love that this is a flip top open. This is a little space saver here where all the small parts can fit around, so you can actually fit this in quite easily in the box and it's not going to rattle around. So points to Hasbro for remembering that people like to put their game back in the box when they're done playing. Might seem like something really simple, but it makes a huge difference. So there's that space saver making that groan in there. Sorry, should have taken that out. Cover art is a little bit different. I noticed that we have a bit more diversity amongst our explorers here, which that's pretty common these days when they're redesigning. And before anybody gets their feathers in a ruffle, I just want to point out the player characters have always been rainbow colored. Now, the idol does not look particularly angry by comparison to the 1992 edition. This guy looks like he wants to give you a really bad day. This guy looks like you interrupted his nap. So, I don't know. And, you know, the other thing is neither one of them look like they match the game. I want to point out, this is something that I noticed here. You look at the cover art in the original, all right? You got this angry idol. He's got these little kind of curly Q earrings. Got the eyes tilted down. When you look at the actual game, his eyes are a bit more round. He doesn't have this curly Qs, but look at this in the 2021 edition. So look at the art. You see these little curly Qs? Right here, he's got these. I don't know what that's called. Curly Q is probably a terrible name for it. It's probably an earring or something. But he's also got this kind of handlebar mustache. I like the mustache, the handlebar mustache. I don't know why they put it in. It's not on the cover art of either game. But again, strangely enough, you look at the cover art of the new one, the cover art for the new game more strongly resembles the maquette or the sculpt from the original game, as opposed to the original cover art more strongly resembles the sculpt for the new game. So kind of weird there, but again, you know, maybe that was the artist's intention with the new one, was take the source art from the original box and try to deliver on it, because hey, nobody likes false advertising. I also noticed that on the back of the box, if you look at the new one, they don't show like happy children playing it or anything. It's very simplistic. It shows the board, it shows what you get, which I'm cool with, because, you know, honestly, when you show little kids playing it, it kind of age locks this. And this game, you know, yes, it's made for a broad audience, but it is a lot of fun, even if you're an adult. I mean, it's simple, it's fast paced, and this catches a lot of attention being set up on your game board. So if you're looking for a pickup and to be social, set this up at the game shop. People will stop by and see what you're doing. So cover art, you know, for the most part, nice, colorful. This looks a little bit friendlier. The text has not changed. It still largely looks like an Indiana Jones ripoff. But I mean, look at the motif of the game. Clearly, you're supposed to feel like Allan Quatermain or Indiana Jones when you're playing this. Going on to the actual game boards themselves, obviously the 1992 edition is significantly larger than the 2021 edition, and this comes into play in a few things that I notice. One, the 2021 edition, lacking this plastic border around the base of the board, has to incorporate these little supports to keep the game board sturdy. The game board itself is actually relatively thin tag board, which should hold up. It kind of feels cheap. I'd like to see that improved if they're going to keep making this. I'd like to see that a little thicker. I think it would help. I do like the two-tone plastic here. I think that's really neat on these little mountains. One thing you're going to notice on the approach mountain, that's this part here, is in the 1992 edition, you have these nice spaces for the explorers to stand. When you get into the 2021 edition, they've shrunk it down so much that those spaces aren't there anymore. They don't have these nice molded squares. So instead, what they do to add a little bit of sturdiness is they add these little pegs into the mold so that the little peg holes that the explorers have for traversing the bridge work on that mountain. It seems a little precarious, but it works. Functionally, it's not going to fundamentally change the game. What does fundamentally change the game is the mechanism and the idle, and that's the part that I'm most excited for. So if you ever played this back in the day, this has not changed. This mechanism is not worn out. This is exactly what it sounded like when I bought it in 1992. We're going to put a little explorer on the bridge here. So when you roll an idle icon while you're playing the game, you have to push down the idle's head and he's going to shake the bridge. So this is what it sounds like in the 1992 edition. That was pretty shrill, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, not great. And you notice that the shaking of the bridge, he only shakes it back and forth like 3 times. Okay, so that's always how the mechanism's been. Once you have explorers on there, you saw it knocked him over, so it does its work. But this is what I really admire about what Hasbro did with the 2021 edition is I love this mechanism. Okay, let's listen to this. First off, listen to the sound. It's so much better. It's lower. I know it's not necessarily pleasant, but compared to the other mechanism, it doesn't sound like something's broken. It sounds like everything's moving like it should. And one other thing you'll notice is the bridge shakes quite a bit. So comparing that to the 1992, here he is much more raucous, and the mechanism runs for what feels like a little bit longer, but it doesn't shake nearly as much as the new. So point to Hasbro here. I think the 2021 edition has the nicer bridge shaking mechanism. But as we see, like there's some differences in the sculpts, little things too, like the bridge in the 1992 edition only has about 1 inch of slack. Whereas when you look at the 2021 edition, we've got almost 2 inches of slack on the bridge. Now, that might actually have an effect on how the game plays. That might actually affect how much the bridge is shaking. So we're going to go ahead and take it on good faith that that was necessary, but it could also be a result of shrinking the parts down. When you scale these games down, you run into little quality of life things. Like I'll use these canoes as an example. So the player character pieces and the canoes are largely unchanged. They're very similar. The old ones feel a little bit thicker. The plastic feels a little bit more sturdy, but there's also more play. When you set the explorer in the canoe, there's a little bit of play here. where the Explorer can be popped out. These new ones, they fit so snugly, you can pick the Explorer up and he takes his canoe with him. So the tolerance is much tighter there. It doesn't quite snap in. That's not the intent on this, because the canoe is a kind of minor part of the game. But I notice subtle differences like that. Another thing is the dice. Now here's interesting. You got the dice. You've got 2 dice to play this game. You've got a numbered dice that determines how many spaces you can move. Then you get the action dice. So you have the idle, you have the jewel, and you have the Explorer icon. Same thing, slightly different markings on the new ones. If you roll the idle, you have to depress the idle's head and make it do the whole. If you roll a jewel, you can take the jewel out of the idle's paw if you're sitting on this space, or if you're sharing a space with another player who has a jewel, you can steal it from them. Now, the one caveat is you can't take a jewel from somebody's canoe if they've left a jewel in there, which I think is kind of strange, because you can take the jewel off of the person physically, but if they leave it unattended in their canoe, you can't. Kind of strange. Now, functionally, the dice are the same, but I want to compare here. These bigger hollow dice, they have this kind of weird, cheap sound to them. You get these modern dice, and they sound like regular dice when you roll them. I like the die from the 2021 edition. So they have a nice weight. Yes, they're smaller, but they're about the size of like a traditional 6-sided die, whereas these seem comically large. So advantage, Hasbro 2021, nice die. So right now, the points as they stand here, the Hasbro edition has a box that you can put the game board away in effectively, and it has a nicer mechanism that does affect the gameplay as the bridge shakes more. So it's a quieter mechanism that's more efficient with shaking the bridge, and you have more pleasant dice. So that's where we stand with the improvements. The trade-off is we have lost some size, so it's not as attractive as this one, in my opinion, as far as when it comes to how the sculpt is. I mean, with that size change, yes, we've gained some detail. Like I think I said this earlier, I love this 2-tone plastic. If I didn't, here it is. I love this 2-tone plastic. I actually think the sculpt looks really nice on both of them with the 2-tone plastic. I'm not super hot on the shift to gray over brown as far as the stone portions of it, but I understand that the base mountains here were largely green. This was green in the original, so I do like having some contrast. Again, those things don't really affect the gameplay too much, but are stylistic. I do like the rigidity that's added to the game board on the 1992 edition by having this border here. And I do like the darker motif. In the 1992 edition, this border is packed with little nods to there being dangerous natives in the area with little heads on spikes. We have many more poisonous snakes. We have a fire depicted on the board, giant spiders. Whereas we go to the 2021 edition, we're dealing with, just crocodiles and snakes. And the art style looks a little bit, I say how they differentiate the spaces, these little lines make the art look very copy paste, whereas this looks a little bit more like a classic movie poster, I guess, a little bit more action packed. So advantage 1992, I prefer the art style on the 1992 edition. You're not winning me over with Pierre's mustache. It's neat, it's funny, it makes me giggle, but the mustache kills me. And while we're talking style points, 1992 edition, all of the jewels are solid red. The 2021 edition, they actually have 3 colors. You can get red, you can get orange, you can get blue, and they're a lot shinier and prettier. So I did like the change in the jewels that you're stealing. These just look nicer. So advantage 2021. Also advantage 2021, though the rules have not changed, the rules have changed in that they are printed in color on a beautiful fold out. I really love this. This is great. I like the shiny glossy paper because it holds up a little bit better. The games that I have that had instruction manuals printed on shiny glossy paper, they tend to have less stains and wear on the paper. I mean, they'll get folded up, they'll get boxed corners like anything else. When you get just this untreated paper here, which there's nothing wrong. This was a great instruction manual. Very complete, very nice prints, very large text, easy to understand. For its time, wonderful. But because it's not on that sealed paper, you can see over time it started to collect grime and stains. And when you start handling it like that, it starts to feel a little gross when these things get worn. So advantage 2021 Hasbro. So overall, I think Hasbro's done a really great job bringing the experience of Forbidden Bridge forward 30 years from 1992 to 2021. I don't think any of the changes that they made fundamentally changed the gameplay. The rules are all the same. Biggest thing actually that fundamentally changes the gameplay at all is the amount of shakes that the bridge gets. I love that. I think that's great. That's exactly what the intent of the game was to be. So this actually in many ways is an improvement over the 1992, even though stylistically one could make the argument that the 1992 edition had some things going on that were a little bit better. It had the larger scale, it had the more detailed maquette, it had the little bit darker scenery on the game board. But the trade-off is the game board on the 2021 edition functions a little bit nicer, in my opinion. Without the borders, it makes it feel a little bit more accessible to the players. You're not reaching in. You can just reach across the game board very easily. So definitely worth picking up the 2021 edition if you're a fan of the original. Dare say, if you have a copy of the original, I would still go out and get a 2021 edition like I did. Because this will be the one that I'm playing with friends and company. This is kind of a collector's piece now that I can keep in good condition because, well, it's aged quite a bit. I want people to be gentle with it. So this is kind of the one that I'll roll out for game night and carry around with me because I'm not so worried about it. And if you'd like to pick yourself up a copy, I do have a link in my description. As an Amazon associate, I can get a small percentage from qualifying sales, so it helps me make awesome videos like this for you. So if you do follow my link and pick yourself up a copy from the Hasbro store, thanks a lot. I appreciate you supporting the channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time. I hope you picked yourself up a copy and have a blast playing Forbidden Bridge. This is Fireball Island, and it's one of the coolest board games of the 80s. Today we're going to have a look at the original 1986 Milton Bradley edition and compare it to the 2021 Goliath Games edition. Let's have a look and see what's changed and what stayed the same over the course of 35 years. Now, let's dive right in with the box art on this 1986 Milton Bradley edition. This is some beautiful box art here. This looks every bit like a hand-painted movie poster. Valkyr is throwing down fireballs at our hapless little explorers, all trying desperately to escape the island. The text in front is very, very evocative of an Indiana Jones poster. We've seen that on some other adventure games we've looked at. I love the little blurb here. The dimensional adventure game of pitfalls and perils. We got a little picture of some kids up front playing the game, enjoying it. Great, great cover. When we flip over the box, we see the game board is displayed on a sandy beach with some mountains and a nice orange glowing sunset with this ominous message, you won't be safe until you're off the island. Now, this is a flip-top box with some little locking cardboard tabs to keep it closed. And the reason this box is so large is this 3D blow molded game board here takes up a lot of space and it's all one piece. So they needed to make sure that the footprint of the board could fit inside the box, which it does nicely. However, even with the locking tabs on this flip-top box, the small parts can really easily slip out. I mean, the game player pieces are tiny. You have 5 glass marbles. You've got a couple of little plastic bridges here, little tokens, and all of those can slip right out through the cracks. So again, this is one of those scenarios where it's a good idea to get a Ziploc bag to keep your pieces close at hand. Now, moving on to the 2021 Goliath Games edition. Now, here's another beautiful cover art. This one is a little bit more modernized as far as the art style. We still have Valkyr throwing fireballs down at our explorers, though this is a much more simplified look. Also, you see a little bit of a change in the font, though it's still very adventure movie-esque. It doesn't quite look as similar as popular licenses like Indiana Jones. So a bit more of a departure trying to be original. It's got those little flame licks on the letter, but it is a nice looking box. When we flip it over, We see there is a photograph of the game board itself. It looks very nice. You can see all the detail, some close-ups of some of the smaller pieces, and some of the perils that players have in store for them. Now, this is a flip-top box. This does not have locking tabs. And as you can see, it's kind of a loose fit here. So small pieces from the game can yet again walk away. Now, in this instance, this current edition of Fireball Island is a 3-piece 3D plastic blow-molded map. So this game board does break apart into 3 stackable pieces that then you can put into this game box here. But I gotta say, this game box, it's a tight fit. I mean, the distance or depth of the box here, the distance from front to back, isn't quite enough to accommodate that stack of 3 game boards very comfortably. In fact, the game came packed with some protective tissue paper over it, and I highly recommend you keep that tissue paper, because when you slide the game board in and out, it's going to rub against that cardboard and possibly rub some of the print off of that game board, which I've actually seen on the 1986 Milton Bradley edition. This version has been well loved and played with quite a bit, and as it's been put in and taken out of the box, it has eventually worn on some of the high spots. So little tissue paper can help avoid that. Anyway, very attractive game box on both sides. They're good at storing their games. They both are flip-top boxes, which I'm not a huge fan. I'm going to go ahead and say I think Milton Bradley wins this round with basic simplicity. I mean, it's just plain big enough to fit everything. It all slides right in. And it's eye-catching. There's something about the sheer size of this. This makes me think of the monolith at the beginning of Space Odyssey 2001. I feel like I should dance around it and hope that it'll give me new technology. So anyway, I really like this one. Moving on to the board and gameplay, starting with the 1986 edition here. What a gorgeous piece of work this game board is. All of the different trails and elevations, it's really great that each little individual spot that your player piece has to stand on is nicely carved out, level and sized so that the player pieces sit comfortably on it. It's a nice thick plastic, so it can handle all of the action of the marbles rolling around on the tray without excess vibration knocking a player, say, on the other side of the board down. Now, how this game is played is it's a roll and move, so players will take turns rolling dice. They'll start at this position right here in the front of the map and make their way along the trail here. As they do, they may land on one of these dark gray spots here, and that gets them to draw an action card. Now, some of these action cards are played right away, and some of them players can hold on to for strategic use later. This is a good example of one that for strategic use. It's the cancel any card except fireball card, which means that if a player has, say, like a steel card or something that has an adverse effect, you can throw this down and it acts kind of like a nope. So there's various different cards that will have you throw fireballs at other players. There are various different cards that'll help you steal a jewel from somebody or keep somebody from stealing the jewel from you, which we'll get to later. Also, one of the dangers of traversing the map is if players roll a 1, they are forced to roll one of these fireballs, either out of the Valkyr idol or one of these little volcanoes around the map. Now, players are required to roll a fireball at anybody who might be in the path. So even if your own pawn is the only target, you have to roll a fireball. I mean, it's an indiscriminate hazard on the island, right? Now, another cool feature is once players get a little bit further on the map, but it's still on the early stretch, they'll pass by a ruin where they collect these little talismans. Now, these can be redeemed at any time during their game or during their turn in the game to get 4 action cards to fill their hand. Each player is allowed a maximum hand of 4 action cards, so it's not like you can hoard a bunch of stuff till the very end of the game. So again, strategic use, you're kind of plotting which one's going to be more valuable to use. And being able to get a full hand right away can really help you hamstring the competition. Players are competing to get up to this Firestone jewel next to the Valkyr idol. Once they take possession of that jewel, they have to race to escape on this boat here. Now, other players can steal the jewel from the player who's got possession of it by jumping their pawn over the player who has possession's pawn, thus stealing it and taking the lead towards escaping off of the island. Now, there are different things that can happen, like action cards that prevent somebody from stealing it when jumping. There are also extra hazards on the second half of the map, like these bridges here. These bridges act as a dead stop. So if a player rolls an amount here, so traditionally, if I roll a 5, I must move my character the full 5. I can't just roll like 5 and move 4 or 3 strategically. I have to move that full amount. But if I come to this bridge, my character dead stops every time. And that bridge is a hazard because it's in the path of fireballs. So if somebody gets a fireball card on their turn, I could be knocked off and go down river. So you're strategically using your action cards, you're trying to avoid fireballs, and you're trying to move across the island as fast as possible. Now, if your character gets hit with a fireball and knocked over, they'll go to the nearest burn pit. It acts basically like a respawn, so on their next turn, they can move out and back along the path. If a player who is in possession of the fireball crystal or fireball jewel gets knocked over, when they go to that burn pit, the jewel sits just outside for somebody to be able to take it. So it becomes up for grabs like a fumbled football, and it becomes no holds barred from then on. Now, another neat feature of these talismans is if you manage to hold on to your talisman and have collected the Firestone Jewel, the Firestone Jewel can be protected with this talisman by preventing other players from stealing your cards. There's a special provisional rule that if you have both the jewel and this talisman, a player cannot steal any cards out of your hand, even if an action card permits them to. So you get that extra little bit of protection on your way to the finish line. This game is really fast-paced. You can get through it between 15 minutes and a half hour. I think it's lots of fun. It's one of those examples of not overcomplicating things. I almost forgot to mention there are various caves around the map too that act as shortcuts, but they can be a risk-reward system. These caves are numbered, and when you enter one, you have to roll to see which cave you come out at. And some caves, it can end up being a shortcut. Other caves, it can set you back or even put you in a dead end, trapping you there for the rest of your turn. I kind of like that little risk reward because if you're being pursued and you just plain need to shake somebody, you can take that chance. There are multiple paths that characters can take, and this map was lovingly constructed. In the instruction manual, one thing that I remarked is every little 8-inch stretch around this island has its own name and almost sounds like there's lore behind it. Like as you're reading the rule book, you're expecting them. I mean, there's ample text in this rule book. It's a whole book. And as you're reading through it, you're expecting more of like a backstory because of how many things are named and how much lore there seems to be. So a lot of love went into this. And that's apparent in the art too. This is a very attractive game board. When you take a close look, there are details like skeletons on the beach, giant pythons in the jungle there. The burn pits look really nice. All the spaces are clearly defined. I would say the only detractor would be the limitations of the print technology at the time. By today's standards, the print on this blow molded game board, it really looks like lower dot per square inch resolution, probably just due to the type of printing process that they had available. So some of the images are not as fine as what we might see on a modern game board, but I think all things considered, it's still a very attractive game board. I think the actual sculpting is just awesome. I mean, I love these little river rapids and everything along the back of the map. It's beautiful. The water looks great. The lava dripping down looks good. I also like the marbles that came with this game were opaque red glass. So they have some heft, they have some weight, and the little player character pawns are very, very small. So in fact, I was surprised that they were this small. For some reason, I just imagined that they would have been bigger at the time, but it's actually nice. It works for the game mechanic because the fireballs weigh so much more than the pawns that if you're hit up high on the mountain, it can drag you all the way down to the base, and that's kind of cool. It makes sure that there are really repercussions for getting hit by a fireball. It actually makes the gameplay very dynamic. So lots of fun, very simple gameplay. Feels like it's going to be complicated when you're first reading the rules because of all the detail that went into the game design. But once you've played it, it's very easy for you to explain to a friend and pick up and play, get through a few rounds within an hour. Lots of fun. Now let's have a look at the 2021 edition of Fireball Island from Goliath Games. Right away we can see this game looks quite a bit different than the 1986 edition. The board has been completely reworked. It's now 3 separate pieces that interlock. I think it's important to note that this version was released in 2021, and you will notice that there is a similar version that was released in 2018 that's no longer available. That one was made by Restoration Games. It's called The Curse of Valkur, Fireball Island, The Curse of Valkur. Now that one had a much more complex rule set, and actually the board was much more similar to what we see on display here. When the rights moved from Restoration Games to Goliath Games, the team at Restoration helped Goliath come up with this, which is a scaled down version of Fireball Island Curse of Valkur, and it has a more streamlined, simplified rule set. So this is the currently available Fireball Island, but I don't want you to get this confused with the 2018 title, Curse of Valkur. Now, getting into this, there are some fundamental gameplay changes that come along with all of these board updates. Players will still start near the front of the map on this helipad, but instead of walking along a more linear path with the goal of getting a hold of the Firestone Jewel and escaping, players are going to be collecting treasure, racing to uncover the most valuable treasure and escape first. There are many more paths to follow than the original, more linear 1986 version, and it's less of a race to steal from your opponents. How it works is as players make their way around the map, they'll pass by these little coins that they can collect. Now, most of them are worth 1 point, but there are 3 special points, or 3 special coins worth 2 points each that are hidden throughout the island. If a player can get up here and steal the crystal jewel, which is called the Heart of Valkur in this version of the game as opposed to the Firestone Jewel in the original, the Heart of Valkur is worth 6 points. Now, when all 3 of the special treasures have been found, that signifies that players should race to get back to the helipad. The first player back to the helipad ends the game and scores an additional 4 points. From that point, all players add up how many treasures they've collected, and whoever has the most points wins. So in this instance, this game can be won without ever collecting the Heart of Valkur. You can actually race around the island and collect as much treasure as you can, and then as soon as the special's found, get back to the helipad first, and you will outscore whoever just went after the crystal. So it adds some variance to the gameplay. They've also changed a few things where, for instance, instead of rolling to move, players draw a card to move, and that card will tell you how many spaces you can move and will usually instruct you with an action to take that will be anything from rotating these little palm trees around, which these palm trees have little guides on the bottom of them that change which direction any of the ember balls or fireballs might roll as they go down these paths. So when you get to rotate the palm tree, it kind of helps you put your opponent player in the line of fire for these ember balls. So there is some strategy there. Now you might have noticed that there is a die included. Well, they still have numbered caves, and it still works like the original game where you go into a cave, you roll a die, and that helps you determine which cave you come out in. There are also scenarios where you're ordered to drop fireballs into Valkur, which you're going to notice that Valkur has multiple different paths out of his mouth this time around, so it's a bit more random when you drop a fireball. In this game, there are also 2 different types of fireballs. There are ember balls, these little orange ones. These sit in tiny spots around the map that are fixed locations. So if you're ordered to roll an ember ball, you just reach over and push it over and it'll roll out of its location down the path. The fireballs are kept in that little space on the far side of the board called the scar. If you're ordered to drop a fireball, then you drop it through the top of Valkur and it goes in a random direction out of his mouth. They've also added some interesting dynamic parts to the map, like there's a little ladder here that you can place characters on they can get knocked off of. There are still 2 bridges, much like the original. The river is a little shallower and the bridges are just little cardboard pieces, so the marble is able to hit and knock you over the same, but it's a little less dynamic. My feelings on this being turned into a coin collecting type game are a bit mixed. I think that There's a lot of fun to be had in the 2021 edition, racing to collect treasure. I do think it's interesting that you can opt to avoid fighting for the Heart of Valkyr jewel and instead go around the periphery trying to get as much treasure as you can. So it does open up some extra strategy. I feel like this game was trying to focus a lot on maximizing the fireballs and ember balls getting rolled around. You know, having the palm trees change the direction of them was kind of neat. But on the same note, having so many paths around this map, I mean, when you really look at it, the art is gorgeous, but it gets to a point where it's very confusing because there's so many options for your characters to go around. And another thing that becomes really apparent when you start looking at the art is you can tell that this board was shrunk down. Like I said, the art is actually very much unchanged from the 2018 Restoration Games version of this. What they did was they shrunk down the size of the mold for this board and then the art on top of it. And what I'm noticing is sometimes where the paths are printed, they don't quite line up. And at first I thought, well, maybe that's just an actual printing issue and not necessarily a design issue. But when you really inspect this game board closer, you'll notice that there are paths that line up perfectly. And on that same board, it doesn't look like it's crooked at all. It just plain looks like they tried to shrink the art file and shrink the 3D mold, and they are just slightly off ratio. And so it doesn't quite have that fit and finish. And I noticed things like the characters, when you're placing them on these pads, they don't all feel as nice and smooth and level and accommodating as the 1986 edition when you're placing your characters on their places. I will say one thing I do like is the little player characters have a lot of detail. Now they have more personality. When you compare to the 1986 edition, all of your pawns or explorers in the 1986 edition look the same. The 2021 edition has a little variety. We have some different characters here with different poses that are all dynamic. So I do like that. There's a lot of attention to detail in the art here, but I feel like a lot of that credit lies more with the team at Restoration Games, and I feel like downsizing it caused a lot of the fit and finish to suffer overall. Now, that's not to say that this game can't be appreciated for its own merits. It is a very fun iteration of Fireball Island. It's quite a bit of a departure from the gameplay of the original. So the best way I'd describe it is almost like a riff or like an homage on the Fireball Island theme. So it is fun, and it's definitely worth having a look. So those are your primary differences in gameplay and design. Let's get to the rule books, starting with the 1986 edition. We already had a little look at this earlier, but this is black and white with some purple accents here. I love that. Like I said, I love that every little spot on the island has a name, like the High Road, the Chasm Peak, Valkyr Point, Viper Pass, Thunder Alley. I mean, it all sounds very neat, and like there should be more of a backstory to it. There's quite a bit to the rules. At first, when I was reading through it, I thought it was going to be a much more confusing game, especially because there's so many names for everything, and they just refer to it like you should just know it. And the names are not printed anywhere on the board. So you're kind of going, okay, so where's Viper Alley? Okay, with this, okay, it's on the map right there. You don't actually have to know the names of the places once you're playing. But it's kind of neat that they made it seem like, you know, Fireball Island was an established place with its lore. I really like this section where every single one of the action cards is neatly displayed and all of its actions are explained so that you know exactly what you're doing in the game. Here's even a little example of if you get the Fireball Jewel, or the, what is it? The Firestone Jewel. I had to read the back of the box again. The Firestone Jewel, and you have one of these talismans, it actually clips into it. You can actually seat it into that talisman too. So they went to the trouble, and I mean, you might only be able to do that for 30 seconds before somebody steals the jewel from you. So kind of fun little detail. A lot of thought went into this. The manual is ample. It tells you how to set up the game. It gives you a feeling like there's lore. It gives you Very, very detailed, finite instructions, and obviously it's held up really well. It's just a little saddle stitched booklet, really attractive, nice manual. 2021 Goliath Games Edition. Now this one is not bound, this is a fold out. It's a full color sealed paper fold out, has a nice photographic representation of the game here. Now my only gripe, this is actually the guide to setting up the game. My only gripe is there was no photo directly above looking straight down at the game, no bird's eye view, and this is sort of a 3/4 view. So there are some locations like back here where an ember ball gets placed, and the little nook that it sits in is so small and such a tiny detail that I kept puzzling over this picture, trying to figure out where exactly that ember ball went. So a bird's eye view picture would have been nice, but nice breakdown of what all the parts are. Got our nice little scorekeeping on the back here for the cleanup phase, list of all the contents. Folds up well, decent size, nice color, so this will definitely hold up. Not quite as fancy as getting like a full-on booklet, but I don't know that you necessarily have to get a full-on booklet to understand this game. And I do like how, in all honesty, if I had to compare who wrote the more concise rules, I would say that the 2021 edition seemed much more straightforward when I was reading through. I feel like the 1986 game is the simpler to play game as far as rules, guidelines, all that stuff, but the rule book made it seem like it was a lot more complex. So win to Goliath Games for writing a good manual and including nice instructions. So how do we break this down? How do we compare these? This is interesting because it's not actually the same game. I mean, realistically, I would consider Fireball Island Race to Adventure by Goliath Games to be more of a spin-off game, or like like I said earlier, an homage to Fireball Island. The gameplay is very similar. It's reminiscent of Fireball Island. It's definitely designed to be more dynamic. They obviously wanted to have more moving parts on the map. They obviously wanted everything to have a function. I mean, doing the treasure and coin collecting, the extra bridges, ember balls versus fireballs. I feel kind of like the designers were really focused on maximizing the hazards on Fireball Island. So this is somebody who really liked the kinetic action that they experienced when playing the original and wanted to kick that up a bit, to really bring it up a notch. The fit and finish, suffering from this being basically a sized down reprint, kind of a downgrade of a different version yet again of Fireball Island. That also is something to take into account. It's still playable, but I will admit the first time that I was playing it, there are little things like, for instance, the numbered caves. When you're playing on the original, the caves are signified by a very dark patch with a white number on it, so the contrast in the print's right there. You know exactly what you're dealing with. In this edition, there are spaces next to the caves that have white text on them. So like, this is a nice thick number 2, but I can hardly see it over the yellow paint underneath. So it's white on yellow, and it's very low contrast. So it was kind of frustrating just trying to figure out where all the caves were. And again, your only guide in the manual is a 3/4 angle view as opposed to a top-down bird's eye view. So again, that little disconnect made it a little bit tougher. Overall, I had a good time playing the game, went through it a couple times. I do miss rolling a die to move as opposed to drawing. It feels, I will say one critique I had was it didn't feel like I had enough of these cards to justify a game where you were drawing to move, if that makes sense. I was constantly feeling like we were going to have to reshuffle everything, and we did get close when we were playing and actually did reshuffle a couple times. So I feel like at the point that you're recycling action cards in the game, that can also be a little bit frustrating. So a light balance issue, and I'm gonna chalk that up to, again, I know that the 2018 edition from Restoration Games had a more complex rule set, so I'm going to guess that some of the disconnect in reducing down the rule set in this and trying to streamline the gameplay, we probably had some balance issues that just had some kinks needing worked out. Now, that being said, as far as balance issues overall, the game feels fair. It feels strategic. It feels like you never feel like you're absolutely getting skunked playing this one. So I do like that. It does, however, almost feel, even considering that you're drawing to move instead of rolling, there's still so much that feels random in it with all the kinetic death that happens on this game. And it also, that's another thing I want to point out when I say kinetic death, is it's really not kinetic death. I mean, we have a lot of stuff moving around, knocking your players over, but unlike the 86 edition, in the 86 edition, you get knocked over, your character ends up in this burn pit, and they have to start there. And that's if that's where their character was when they got knocked over. You can get knocked all over the map. Here, you're just flipping your character back up. So you lose some treasure for getting hit, but you're just flipping the character back up. There's not, I mean, you can get moved around, but there's not a burn pit. You don't have a setback on your turn or anything. It's kind of designed to keep things moving, but it feels a little weird to get like, oh, if you get hit, you just lose a little treasure. And that again makes it feel again like a video game, like Mario or Sonic getting hit and dropping a bunch of his rings. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much I like the coin collecting adventure, but I think the dynamic worked, and I think overall, as a standalone game, it is fun. I think I paid like $25 for this, and I would say for $25, I definitely got my money's worth. I think a lot of people were looking at this game and looking back on the 1986 Milton Bradley edition with rose-tinted glasses and wanted to relive that. And I've seen some reviews online where people were very disappointed with this game because it wasn't like the original. And I can understand if you're expecting one flavor, if you want cherry Coke and you get Dr. Pepper, you're going to be a little confused. So I get that, but that's not to detract from the work that went into this game. I think it's worth playing. I think it has merit. Now, moving on to the 1986 edition, I can't hide that this is my preferred version of the game. The quality of the game board, that nice thick plastic, overall the topographical design, in my opinion, is a lot cooler. I love how they have the rushing rapids, the gorges, the mountains, the trails. It screams. It's perfect. I like that it's all one piece. It's easy to set up. There's not a lot of extra superfluous small parts all over it. It's quite stable. I mean, they have rules in this one that if you or your cat bump the table, that doesn't count as setting anyone back, but there you go. 1, 2. So there's still a chance to knock these marbles over, but I mean, just everything fits where it's supposed to. And I like that. The shrunk down map here makes things feel like they don't quite fit, makes all the parts feel like they're just a hair too large for the map. So not having that and having the whole game feel just designed from the ground up to be itself, to be built to be what it is, hands down makes a huge difference. Gameplay being that everybody's chasing the MacGuffin, I love it. It's a lot of fun. I'm okay with the roll and move because you have enough action options that you can hamstring your opponents, you can get stuck. Having the dead stop bridges near the end are awesome. And I love how the marbles can knock them out right off the bridges down the rapids, and they have to start down here on the beach opposite of their escape. So they have to go back around these dead spots. Like, this portion of the map is really a nice bottleneck that catches players. A lot of thought went into how this was built and how this keeps all of the players together and keeps the pace breakneck all the way to the end of the game. At no time did I ever feel like there was one of those power curve things happening where once a player broke away and got a lead, there was no catching up. I always felt like I had a strategic opportunity to catch up to my opponent. So, my opinion overall, I favor the 1986 edition of Fireball Island. I think it's the one that I would play with new players first. However, that being said, I do think that Fireball Island Race to Adventure has a lot of merit, and I think it's worth playing, and I'm glad it's in my collection. So now I put it to you, 1986 Milton Bradley or 2021 Goliath Games. Fireball Island, what do you think? Have you played it? Do you love it? Comment below and let me know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.